Welcome to another episode of the Caroline Glick Show. Today, when I'm taping, which is Tuesday, the day after Yom Kippur, we mark the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Yom Kippur War. There was a big ceremony in Mount Herzl, and the Prime Minister was there, the Defense Minister was there, the President was there, along with bereaved families. And obviously, the issue of the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago in 1973 has really been dominating the news cycle. I had Professor Alicia Haas on in July, I believe, to talk about its enduring impact on Israeli society. And Professor Haas made some really important points there about the changing of the guards from the first generation to the second generation, and then said now we're moving really into the third generation. But I want to talk today about how the war 50 years ago impacted the army in its aftermath, and also the generals and the soldiers who fought there. And for that, I thought it was a good idea to bring in our friend on the show and my very good and old friend, Major General Gershon Hacohen. So first of all, Gershon, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you know, you're always invited, but especially this week. And, you know, you were just a young soldier when the war started.
Yet not 18 years old. I joined service as a young 17-and-a-half-year-old young boy. And we just ended the first exercise company training and platoon training with fire. I was very proud. And in the first days, I was just in anxiety, maybe again, as it happened in 1967, I will lose the war.
You'll miss the war.
Yes. Yes. And we immediately found ourselves in Sinai and after in the west side of Suez Canal.
Right. Well, I want to actually begin our discussion with just said to recall somebody who was at the top of the chain then. He was a full colonel. He was brigade commander, the 14th Brigade. His name was Amnon Reshef. And he was a colonel then when you were, I guess, a private in basic training. And Amnon Reshef really was a war hero. I mean, in the first 2 weeks of the war, more or less, were us just losing 1,000 people, losing battles. The Egyptian forces were able to cross the Suez, and I think almost every single one of the encampments along the canal zone were overrun. And it was an utter disaster. Also in the Golan Heights, we were caught by surprise and barely were able to manage to hold ground in the Golan at that point. But then it all sort of started turning around, first in the Golan Heights and then in the Sinai. And so I think it was the 12th of October. So it started at the 6th of October. It's 12th or 13th of October.
14 was a turning point by succeeding to really stop and to destroy the second offensive stage of the Egyptians.
Right. So just to summarize, so like the Egyptian army, their first wave was the 6th, and then was it the 14th? I thought it was the 12th, but I'm sure that you're right. That they
No, the whole organization for that, and the first information came in the 12th. And between 12 to 14, actually, the Southern Front Echelon Command prepared itself to defensive operation. First time that the IDF really prepared itself to defensive operation according to all the principles, with 3 divisions, armored divisions, with arranging defensive troops to defend the rear echelon, very, very important positions like the headquarters in the rear echelon, and it was a real step to be well prepared for that step of the Egyptians.
And it was so important because, I mean, one of the things that is striking when you think about what happened on the 6th of October was, and this goes back to a deeper discussion about whether the Bar-Lev line ever made any sense. I mean, Talik and Arik Sharon both opposed it, and the rest of the general staff wanted it, and at least according to Yossi Blum Halevi in his book on the war. And in retrospect, it was a big mistake, and it was certainly a mistake when they realized that the Egyptians were likely to attack. But that's another issue. But it was important that then they found defensive ground that they were able to push back the Egyptians from. So that was the ground that Amnon Reshef held with his 14th Brigade. Then I think it was the largest tank battle since World War II, and they were able to kill just his brigade, like 100 Egyptian tanks that night. And then the whole division, was it 143? Is that what it was?
Yes.
143, they were able to kill another 100 Egyptian tanks, and then that started the counteroffensive that led to the crossing of the Suez Canal and the encirclement of the Third Army. But Amnon Reshef then went from that night to the next stage, which was being part of the offense. And so the minister Amichai Shikli wrote up the battle essentially on his Twitter page, and I found it rather important and a good way to start a discussion. So he quotes what Reshef said to the reconnaissance battalion that led.
It's a very known speech and historical concrete evidence for leadership in battlefield.
Right. So his essential message to them, if I wanted to just sort of summarize it instead of trying to do a simultaneous translation, is he said to them, look, I just spent a lot of time on the telephone with generals and the general staff, and I gave them confidence because of the way that you fight, because you are such heroes and you've done such extraordinary work that now they believe in us and that we can do this counteroffensive. So, and then they all answered him with the sort of Israeli army, hoo-yah, the battle cry, and then they went off. And then that day, actually, in their battle, which was successful, but it was at great cost, 121 of his soldiers were killed, including the commander of the recon battalion and also one of the company commanders there. And so but they went into battle, and that was the decisive battle of the war. And, it was
the most heroic armor battle in the whole history of armor engagement.
And you say this as a man who left the army as a major general, and your last combat position or combat command was Division 36, which is Israel's main regular or most elite regular armored brigade or a division, which is in the Golan Heights. So you know what you're talking about.
I know very well Amnon Reshef. I'm really respecting his leadership in that war. I had the chance to listen to his story in November 1974. That time he was already deputy division commander, and I was a young cadet in armor officer school.
So the thing about Amnon Reshef, and the reason that I wanted to start with him, was because now he is, for the past several years, he is the leader of a radical left group of retired generals who have, gotten millions and millions of dollars in funding from unknown sources abroad to launch this campaign to say that for Israel's security, we have to surrender Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem to the Palestinians. And to me, at least in the olden days, before we all got wise and lost our innocence, but this is counterintuitive. And, and it's not the first time. When I was in the army, we got this thing, I was in the negotiations with the Palestinians, and my commander was Danny Rothschild, who's also a major general, was the coordinator for government activities in the territories. And he and Uri Savir, who was the director general of the foreign ministry at the time, they gave us these certificates of commendation for working in the negotiations, and the certificates that they gave us, they were actually supposed to be signed by Yitzhak Rabin, and they were supposed to be given to us the day after he was murdered at an official ceremony and whatever. Anyway, so it was a quote, I think, from Douglas MacArthur, the American general, saying something like, nobody wants peace more than soldiers because we know the price of war. And I thought that it was a stupid thing to say at the time. It was a cliche, and it was also like, it's not for us to decide. We're in the army, so what is...
It is the cliches that bringing us to the position of Marshal Petain.
Right, exactly, to appeasement. And I'm wondering, what happened to these lions who were fighting like just unbelievable courage that they displayed in 73, and now they've become... what happened to the IDF? What happened to these incredible heroes? Because just like him, there are a lot of people who were heroes from 73 who were part of this far left group.
Yes, it is actually a riddle. In the following centuries, a lot of dissertations will be focused about this riddle. And it is an absolute riddle because it is a mystery.
Wrapped in an enigma.
No, mystery is an issue that you can get all the information and then to find yourself far away from getting understanding. Actually, this is a mystery. It is a blindness. And we can begin to clarify where exactly I have in agreement with them, disagreement with them here or there. Actually, they are not at all understanding the new warfare, not even understanding the warfare that have been created by Sadat. He actually succeeded to bring a new idea of warfare, and actually who really succeeded to adapt this creativity, Hezbollah, Hamas. And the main idea of Sadat was that you don't have to really get a definite achievements,
victory,
achievement in the battlefield. What really he wanted to achieve is not just a definite, concrete position, a concrete 10 kilometers east on the Suez Canal or 5 kilometers. What he succeeded to do, and he intended that and spoke about that, and we can really read his directive to the Egyptian forces, that what he is really intending to achieve is to create a shock to the Israeli self-confidence, a shock to the trust of the Israelis about their whole premises of the conceptual framework regarding the security conception. And actually he succeeded by far. And he was aware about the fact that it is not an engineering process that you can really inform by details what will be first stage, second stage. He says that stages will emerge from what he is achieving. He is not controlling them. Actually, what he succeeded to push the Israelis, and mainly is those who are leading Israel, is a kind of autoimmune disease. It means that since that, we are defeating ourselves. So even though to bring the diagnosis that it is a kind of autoimmune disease, not yet bringing a kind of prognosis, how really we are going to cure from it.
So wait, let me just stop you for a second, because I think what you said is really big, and I just want to unpackage it a little bit, right? So a couple of things. First, the Israelis. What you're saying, and I think you're correct, but your essential point about the Israelis is that they never understood the war that was being waged
until today.
Until today, for the past 50 years, at least Israel's leaders have not understood the war that they were fighting, and so that's amazing, right? Because on the face of it, and Elisha Haas talked about this as well. He said, that two different camps emerged, and they never came back together again from that war. On the one hand, you had the people like myself, the on the right, the religious Zionists, whatever, who looked at it and said, look at what we did under the command of people like Amnon Reshev and Ariel Sharon and Avigdor Kahalani and whomever in the north. We won an extraordinary victory. Yeah, it's true, we came from behind and they surprised us, but this is proof that we're right. Let's go forward and let's do more. Let's settle the country, let's settle Judea and Samaria, let's settle the Sinai, let's do this. And Gush Emunim arose from that. And then the second one that he calls them vectors was Shalom Achshav, was peace now, that was established after the war, and their takeaway.
And those who established, among them Yuval Neriah, with a medal, first medal for heroism.
Oh, so the top heroism medal in battle.
Yes, he was lieutenant at that time. He was the husband of Yuli Tomir, together with Ishlach Yaakov, the son of the sister of Yitzhak Rabin, etc.
So they came away and said, it's all our fault. And Gadi Taub said last week, they came away with this idea that the consolation for what happened in the first week and a half of the war was that it was our fault, that they bought the idea that this war wouldn't have started without, if it hadn't been for our misbehavior, and that we were to blame for what happened to us. And that's the second part, and that's the thing that you were talking about, which was Sadat. So let's just unpack it. You showed me
I'll show it to you.
Yeah. You showed me the internal Egyptian military document.
The authentic order, the authentic directive
that Sadat gave to
the general staff, yes.
So he gave this order to the general staff on the eve of the war, and basically this is
it was 1 of October.
The 1st of October. So he says here that I'm just translating from the Hebrew. It says that the strategic goal that I am putting before the armed forces of Egypt and that I take full responsibility for from a diplomatic perspective is that, and he said, and it says the basis of everything that I've heard and learned about our preparation to this day, I can summarize it as follows. It says, to undermine the warfighting the Israeli warfighting doctrine by carrying out a military operation that we can actually carry out, and our purpose is to cause the enemy the heaviest casualty rate possible and to convince him that the continued control of our occupation of our land is going to force him to pay a price that is too high for him, and as a result, their whole security doctrine that has been based until now, the whole security doctrine of his is wrong, and that we are going to put psychological terror on them from a diplomatic and military perspective. And then he goes on, and
the end is very important. At the end, he said, and then stage by stage,
from the short-term perspective, it's possible to undermine the Israeli security doctrine and to bring a certain consequence that is going to be able to for us to get to an honorable solution to the Middle East problem, and in the Middle East crisis. And for the long term, it's possible that it will undermine the security doctrine, the Israeli security doctrine, to actually changed the whole way that the Israeli enemy thinks about itself and its morale and its aggressive plans. And then at the end it says here, the international isolation of the enemy and the atmosphere domestically because of the partisan struggles on the eve of the elections and different personal clashes are going to advance or improve our prospects for hitting them at a time that's comfortable for us. So, I think...
Actually, he succeeded.
It's true. So what he was trying to do was induce a psychological shock to demoralize the Israelis. That all happened to make us blame ourselves for the aggression.
Just summarize that.
Yeah.
If we are taking the idea of Jabotinsky, written in at 1923, and was really adapted by Ben-Gurion and by all his company, Mapai, his party. The idea was that we have no other way but to establish what he called the iron wall.
Right.
Kira Barzel.
Right.
And actually what Sadat succeeded to do, it is to break, not only to shock, to break the iron wall that was really built step by step since 1936 to 1967 and to the attrition war after.
So Amnon Lord, who's also been on this show, is that he was also a veteran of 73, and he edited this supplement for Yisrael Hayom on the war in 73 that came out, I think, last week. And his article on it was saying that, one of the things that really blocked, he was talking about intelligence failures and what kind of intelligence failure and how to look at it and who to blame for the unclear understanding of what the Egyptians' intentions were, and should we call up the reserves and should we prepare for war, etc. He said was actually the Israeli left. It wasn't that the thing that was deterring Golda and Moshe Dayan from attacking, and from people like David Elazar and Eli Zeira and all the rest of them from saying we have to attack in a premeditative way. It was people like Hanoch Levine, the playwright, who was writing these pacifist satires that were becoming very popular, that were being shown at the theaters in Tel Aviv, and that they were deterred, and Matzpen, and they were being deterred by the Amos Oz's of Israel more than the
Golda Meir was not deterred. What happened after the war, the whole party, Mapai, collapsed.
Right.
And this what brought Peace Now movement, that it is not Mapai. Mapai, we are all suffering that they are just vanished from the Israeli political arena because they have been absolutely Zionistic, activists, supported the momentum of settlements, and they led a united nation in Israel. They united the people. Since that, we are not united. This is due to the disappearance of Mapai. And what happened to the just emerging of Gush Emunim, to the vacuum of disappearance of the momentum, the pioneering momentum of Mapai? They entered because what happened to the religious group that always belonged to a religious Zionistic party that was in a way like a satellite of Mapai. Just imagine what could happen to the moon going around the Earth, and suddenly the Earth collapsed. It is going beyond control. This happened to the group of Hanan Porat. The main center of gravity collapsed, and therefore they found themselves isolated.
Wait just a second, parenthetically, keep that thought. It's just so that the audience knows. So Hanan Porat was one of the founders of Gush Emunim.
I'm still Mapainik. Well, it means that...
Wait, just one second.
I never trusted Netanyahu and Likud because they never really led settlements.
Let me just say, okay, Hanan Porat and Gush Emunim are the young guard of the national religious community that spearheaded the establishment of all of the so-called settlements, the communities in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, that really started with full momentum after 73. So Gush Emunim was founded after the war, and so was Shalom Arshav, the Peace Now movement. And so, so now for all of the uninitiated initiated outside of Israel. Now go on.
And the main indicator to the effect of that collapse is an agreement that came in Camp David by Menachem Begin.
Right.
Not Yigal alone, even not Shimon Peres could bring us to such an agreement to destroy and to uproot the settlements in Sinai.
Right.
Yigal alone didn't vote to support this peace agreement.
No, they did.
Even Rabin was against, because what's the difference between Mapai and Menachem Begin? Mapai, led by Ben-Gurion, never really think about a fixed peace, a peace treaty or something like that, not a contract. They never believe in a contract because they are believing that the struggle is permanent. So why to get a piece of contract? Menachem Begin was a real liberal, came from Poland, and he was a lawyer. In obsession.
Although Ben-Gurion was also a lawyer.
In obsession to get a contract. Yitzhak Rabin said that to my father and to Hanan Porat in visiting in 1979 in Gush Etzion. We would not come to that in agreement. We would prefer just a short of peace, we can call that. It means less than a whole peace, just a declaring end of hostile activities, and this was enough. And therefore, why it was enough for them? Because they would never accept to uproot Jewish settlements. The first one who did that was Menachem Begin.
So, you're right, but we have to bear in mind a couple of things. The person who said we're better off with Sharm el-Sheikh and no peace than peace without Sharm el-Sheikh was Moshe Dayan. And Moshe Dayan was Begin's foreign minister.
Yes, he helped a lot to achieve this peace agreement.
And the thing about that,
but Yigal Alon was the guest.
Well, Yigal Alon was the big defeat of Mapai, was that he was pushed out of leadership by the likes.
Actually, it was Achdut Avodah in order to make it, but doesn't matter the difference. It is
let me just say, but the thing with Moshe Dayan and his role in Camp David and Ezra Weitzman as well was that Camp David was an indicator that despite the incredible victory that the IDF won at such enormous cost in that war, and it really was the line soldiers who did it and not the generals so much, was that we accepted the surrender terms of the enemy at the end. We gave Sadat exactly what he was demanding, and if
it was the last meter,
right, and including the humiliation of Taba. If he had a war plan to actually take all of Sinai, right, he would have gotten the same. He would have gotten the same surrender. If he didn't. He lost from a military perspective.
Yes, but this was his idea that he creating a kind of war that even if he is
unconditional surrender,
he will succeed to get.
But he got an unconditional surrender from us. That's what's so amazing, is that when you look back at the terms of the peace settlement with Egypt, it was complete surrender. And by the way, all the parts about peace, the normalization chapters in the peace treaty, the Egyptians never implemented. So that the thing that we were supposed to get from them, which was actual recognition of our rights, we didn't get. We had to sign on to the autonomy plan for the Palestinians, which was the blueprint or the basic framework for the Oslo peace.
And always they have an excuse that we
gave everything to
fulfill our all commitments. Menachem Begin thought that his obligation to build the autonomy for the Palestinians is not really important for Sadat, but he was
used
just
against us.
Dreaming. He didn't really respect the deep commitment of Sadat to the Palestinians. And just beyond that, we must here emphasize another.
He had a complete victory. I mean, what I'm saying is that Sadat's idea for 73 he did get a full surrender of Israel. And then you just say, just going back to Amnon Refshef and how he became a radical leftist and all of his colleagues that became radical leftists along with him. And still 50 years later, not understanding what Sadat's plans were. I mean, this, like you said, it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery, and to bludgeon Churchill a little bit more, surrounded by an enigma. I mean, this is crazy stuff.
This wouldn't happen if Yitzhak Rabin was prime minister. I'm sure about that. But
look what Yitzhak Rabin did then 20 years later.
Because the precedent was already fixed by Menachem Begin, that this is a price to withdraw everywhere to the end of the borders of 4th of October. But another narrative that we must really disconfirm is a manipulation created by Yigal Kipnis. Wrote books about that. His main claim is the following. Actually, according to his claims, supported by Americans, and they are making all the best exploitation of that manipulation, that Sadat offered peace agreement before the war, and the fact that Golda Meir just rejected that offer, she became responsible to the emerging of the war. It means that the war was absolutely not at all necessary. This is a disaster for the Israeli consciousness. It means that all what we paid is just for nothing because we could achieve the same surrender before to bring back all Sinai. But it is a lie, because what really Sadat offered was just that we will accept to withdraw, and then he will be ready to speak, not at all committed to declare an obligation for peace and recognition, not at all. It means that actually without the achievements of IDF in the war, with a decisive victory in the battle, he wouldn't come to the offer of a recognition of peace. It is actually due to the war. And why it is so dangerous? Because I listened to Ehud Barak when he was defense minister 2010, for example, speaking to 400 colonels and generals in summarizing a year.
Was this when you were the commander of the war colleges?
Yes, and commander of the Northern Corps.
Okay.
Listen, if we will have a war with the Syrians, and we will succeed to really attack by massive offensive to come to Damascus, then we will find ourselves in negotiation. And the negotiation will begin about the borders of 4 June 1967. Therefore, for what we are going to fight, if we could achieve that peace in the same way without paying all the war.
So he was preaching complete demoralization.
And I told him, listen, my duty as a corps commander is to create a victory that outcome of it will never bring them to really demand beginning the negotiation in speaking about 4 June 1967 border.
So I guess in a way...
And just to understand 4 June borders, it means that even El Hama, for example, that was in 1949
this is an
agreement in the Israeli side,
right? This is a
but was captured by the Syrians in 1951. This is an occupation by the Syrians, but it was in their hands in 4 June 1967. It means that they demanded that as well. It means that it is absolutely unconditional surrender of us.
So here's the thing. I mean, there are two different things that sort of...
and I'll just emphasize something more. I'm sure that the Americans worked together with Kipnis to accelerate this manipulation, to tell the Israelis, listen, don't be stubborn to reject all the options for peace, because then you will get another Yom Kippur War and you will find yourself just paying what you can get now.
So there are two different directions that I want to take this. And the first one is Barak and the IDF in general and how they look at the purpose of war. So, I mean, there are, I guess, a couple of things. One is that what he's preaching is complete demoralization, because what he's saying to the military commanders then and previous to then and also subsequently since then is that war is completely worthless, that sacrifice is worthless, that no matter what we do, no matter what we achieve at the battlefield, we'll still be in the same place where we're in the wrong, where the person, the side that's in the wrong is Israel, and we're going to be required to surrender our land. And this is land, of course, that not only do we have a legal and sovereign right to, but
this is exactly what I'm calling
survive
autoimmune disease.
So that the top echelons of our military-industrial complex, whatever, our social elite in Israel, they have latched on to Sadat's psychological warfare gambit. They've embraced it, internalized it now for 50 years, and they're pushing this idea that war has no purpose, and that and that's pretty terrible. I mean, that's absolutely terrible. How do you prepare an army for war under these circumstances? If you're the Northern Command commander, or if you're the commander of the training division of the IDF, I mean, how do you prepare forces? How do you give them any reason to fight?
We must mention here Major General Benny Pellet, that commanded the Air Force in 1973, right, in blessing Israel for the year 2000, one of his blessings was that he's really praying that we will have here a generation that will neglect the idea that we are here just in order to get a safe shelter agreed by the international community, and we are here in order to struggle for our liberty and to be agreed to pay the price to get that liberty.
So, I mean, okay, so that's one area, and maybe we can look into it a little bit more. But the other one is the American part, and I don't necessarily want to go into detail here, but I do just want to throw a couple of things out and see. You can take them wherever you want to, because it's not diplomatic or whatever. But I started reading over Yom Kippur a book by Bruce Brill, who is Israeli now, but he was born and raised in the United States, and he served in the National Security Agency during his military service as a language expert. And he happened to be there in the Egyptian Arabic section during the war. And he tells a story that his allegation, which was since borne out by apparently Eli Zaira and others, who was the head of intelligence, was that he's Jewish, and he was planning on going to his parents' house over Yom Kippur of 73. And on October 4th, he talked to his commander and said, I'm going to Long Island. And his commander says, you're not allowed to leave the base, because if you leave, because war is going to start on Yom Kippur, and you're not allowed to leave. And he thought he was joking because he thought, well, we would have told the Israelis that. And the commander told him that it's absolutely ironclad. The Americans know that they have the war plans of the Egyptians, of the Syrians for the invasion, and it's going to take place on Yom Kippur. So he went home anyway, and then on Yom Kippur morning, on Shabbat, I think he got a call, said, you have to come back immediately. The war started. So he came back. He drove back to Fort Meade. And the thing is that then he discovered in the intervening years that what had happened was not only that the Americans had the information, but that they then gave disinformation to Israel. They lied and said that the probability of war was low. And that's what they told Zahira, and Zahira claims that his contention to Dayan and to Golda Meir was that the probability of war was low, was based on what he got from the NSA. So that it was a lie that the Americans told Israel on the eve of war that the probability was low and that therefore we didn't have to draft the reserves or anything else. The other thing that he brought in the book was this communique that, through Freedom of Information Act was made public, was a conversation that Henry Kissinger had with his Soviet counterpart, Dubrynin, unless Dubrynin wasn't the foreign minister. I think he was the ambassador, the Soviet ambassador to Washington, where Kissinger said this was when the IDF was already on the Egyptian side of the canal, and we were encircling the Third Army. So we were on the brink of a complete victory in that war. And we had already, I think we were like 20 miles from Damascus or whatever. So Kissinger says to Dubrynin, my nightmare is that one of the sides wins a clear-cut victory, and Dubrynin agreed with him. And then there's also all this stuff that Alexander Haig brought in his memoir that Brill also cited, which was that the Defense Secretary Schlesinger and Kissinger were blocking that Nixon had said on the eve of war, give the Israelis everything that they want. And then they sat on it and they didn't. They didn't resupply us until before the second wave of the Egyptian assault. And so they let us bleed and run low on our platforms for a week and a half. And then Nixon came back. I think he had been in Florida. He came back to the Oval Office and was at the height of the Watergate crisis that led to Nixon's resignation in 1974. But everything was coming out the week of the war. And he still called Kissinger and I think Schlesinger into the Oval Office, and he banged on the table and he said, what does Israel want? Tell me everything. And he said, fine, double it. And so that was only when the C-130 Hercules started sending stuff to Israel. So this was, I think, on October 12th or 13th. So basically the point that he makes here is that the Americans, and you can take this anyway, wherever you want to, but that the Americans, at a minimum, acted in horrible bad faith towards Israel. And yet,
even in the
we redoubled our
agreement,
but we
Syrians,
let me just
Kissinger,
and we expanded our dependence on the Americans after the war. Again, counterintuitive, right? It would seem to me that even if you only had a limited amount of this information at your fingerprints, that your response would be, okay, let's not make ourselves entirely dependent on the U.S. Air Force. U.S. aircraft.
Dependent upon any state.
Particularly since the Air Force actually lost its war in 1973, but it was the ground forces that won the war, it was the tanks. So why would we continue to pretend that the Air Force was our strategic arm when they had so completely failed to be our strategic arm in 1973? You would take a step back, but instead the same general staff, the same elite that internalized Sadat's gambit, they also didn't see anything wrong with continued and expanded dependence on the United States.
Actually, it is another riddle. It's not a foreign
answer.
No, but I must again, praise Yitzhak Rabin, 1975. We didn't yet agreed with the Syrians about the whole details regarding the ceasefire agreement, and Kissinger insisted about a deeper withdrawal from, for example, from Tel Hazeka, a very, very important hill, and he claimed against Yitzhak Rabin that he is stubborn regarding 3 hills. Everyone aware about the role of these 3 hills as a watershed line can get the understanding that Kissinger demanding Israel to lose the control of the watershed line in the Golan Heights.
Watershed line, you mean?
The watershed line, it means that that line of hills, if you are standing upon them, you are observing all the east side to Damascus with the superiority of observation, intelligence, etc. On the other side, if the Syrians are taking these positions, they are with observation to the depths of Israel to Haifa.
Okay.
So it is either or, either we are there or they are there.
Okay.
And he insisted that we will give them to Assad, and he created a crisis. March in 1975, he broke the negotiations and just
he being Rabin, not Kissinger.
No, Kissinger. And Rabin insisted about the Israeli demands, and he succeeded.
He didn't give up.
Yes.
Okay. But he did give up in the Sinai. I mean, the disengagement in the Sinai in the 1974 agreement.
But in Sinai, because of the depth of the territory, it was quite okay to do that. In the Golan Heights, it is just to lose the Israeli topographical superiority.
Okay. So, again, I was so struck by Reshef, because I'll tell you, I debated him a while ago when he first emerged with this radical leftist group that he was the leader of. I think it was like in 2010, something like that. And we were on an Israeli show, London and Kirchenbaum, and I think that was what it was. And the truth is, I'm sort of embarrassed in a way, because I didn't realize what a hero he was when I was talking to him. I was looking at him as just a normal, left-wing radical, and in a way, it's more upsetting understanding, what he did for this country in '73, that he would just be so opposed to the existence of Israel at this point. I mean, like you can't have a country without Jerusalem.
But I understand. I'm recommending you to invite Professor Dan Shiftan, that just now ended the research. It will be published as a book about the years before the war and what happened in the war. First of all, he's absolutely disconfirming the manipulation of Kipnis, that there was a serious offer by Sadat before, in February 1973. It is a lie, according to his research. And beyond that, he is really giving a very large overview about the whole strategic analysis of Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan and Galili, the cabinet of Golda Meir before the war, not just in the last week before the war, but along the months that
preceded the war.
Yes.
So, okay, I'll have him on. I guess I was a little bit leery of him because he became like the favorite of the general staff, because he wrote a book about how we have to give up Judea and Samaria. Right. So, but I understand he's gone past that, which is good. But it's one of the things that I mean, I got this SMS today from a colleague of mine. We're in this group together. We fight a lot, but he was talking about his son just was inducted into the IDF and is doing training in one of the elite commando units. And he said that the unit is broke down to 2/3 religious, 1/3 secular.
Even not secular, Masorti.
Well, traditional. I don't know what...
Most of Israelis are not secular. We must emphasize that. Not everyone driving a car on Saturday is a secular.
Well, no,
most of Israelis are absolutely not secular.
Right, this is a myth that they actually sell, that the secular Israelis, the minorities, sell to American Jews. I remember growing up believing that only American Jews go to synagogue on Yom Kippur, that Israeli Jews all go to the beach, because what they told American Jews in the 70s after the war was that they had to go to the beach to get everybody to come to the army, because that's where everybody was. And this was a total lie, a complete lie. Almost everybody was at the synagogue on Yom Kippur. And I remember when I started discovering that, I was really upset, because I felt like I had just been lied to about Israeli society. And it was actually something that sort of deterred me from wanting to make Aliyah. Like, do they even know they're Jewish?
Speaking again about Amnon Reshef, he made a very huge, he accomplished a vision. Instead of just making an evening for his soldiers after 50 years, he succeeded to collect 4.5 million shekel, and he really succeeded to write, not by himself, a play, and it was a spectacle. And one of the scenes in that spectacle is the prayer together of the soldiers in the night before the emerging of the war, the day after.
Wait, he wrote a play about the war?
Yes.
When?
No, it was in Latrun. Everyone must really find that. It is impressive. It is inspiring, because this is a Jewish Israeli picture that all soldiers with talit together. Doesn't matter whether all of them or not. Even if we will look upon the new movie, Hamezach.
Yes.
Story of the position that at the end surrender.
Right. That surrendered last.
Yes. There is
along the Suez Canal.
Excellent scene in that movie about the first night in Kol Nidrei. All the soldiers are praying. Only the doctor, the medical doctor, outside with a cigarette, but he's together with them mentally. And at the end, he is committed to them. It is not to speak about people gathered from several positions, absolutely ununited. They are united, definitely.
And it's very terrible to see how Reshef today and his colleagues are trying to tear apart the IDF, calling people not to serve in the IDF, and that's really where I want to go. Sort of as we can conclude this conversation is so. Going back to a second to the conversation that I had with Elisha Haas when he was talking about how, in 73 it was really the emergence of the second generation of the sons of the founders who were much less attached to Judaism, who were much less attached.
Actually, it is not second generation; it is first generation. Yes.
So let me take it. He was saying second, and if we go by him, we can pretend for a second he didn't say it, and we were talking about the third generation, now we're at the fourth, but we're at a changing of the guard again today, is his contention. The question is, what is this guard? What is this generation that we're seeing now? So on the one hand, we have my friend and his son who just was inducted into the IDF, who's doing training in this commando unit. And on the other hand, we have these young Israelis who are in Tel Aviv, and I'll be talking about this in my In Focus a monologue show that comes out around the same time as our conversation does, but that were attacking the Jews in Tel Aviv who were basically not that religious, who were coming out to pray on Yom Kippur in public in the eve of Yom Kippur, and they were assaulted by essentially a bunch of Jewish pogromists. But there are a lot of young people who are doing this, and they're saying they're burning their draft notices and they don't want to serve in the army. Or if they're in the army, then, they're very pacifist. And
actually, they are minority.
Okay, but what is this generation?
It is a minority that behaving like a majority.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority behaving like minority. This is the main problem of Israelis today.
Okay, so what is this generation now? Like we've had 50 years of this inculcation of defeatism that we see with it.
I'll give an example.
Well, we have
the mayor of Nahariya today he was colonel, very successful in Givati. And when I was Major General, commanded the National Defense College, he was a cadet there, student, and he asked me, tell me, are you going to synagogue? I told him, yes, of course. How you making tefillin? He told, yes, of course, every day. He said, me too. And then I told him, listen, we must create a proud parade. Those who are using everyday tefillin, because we are the majority. I told that to Itzik Mordechai, that time in the war 73, he commanded the paratroopers battalion
890.
Yes, in the very, very massive, difficult battlefield in what is called the Chinese farm.
Right, yeah. Every single one of his company commanders was...
And I told him this story. What was his reaction? Listen, since my bar mitzvah, there was not even one day that I didn't make tefillin. Even in that awful day, in that battle in October in Chavasinit, in the Chinese farm, it was part of the whole battle to create the conditions to cross the Suez Canal.
Right.
So this is a typical majority of the Israelis.
So when you look at the minority pretending to be the majority or acting like the majority acting like it's the minority, 50 years on from Yom Kippur and the internalization of Sadat's psychological warfare, and to a degree the American psychological warfare by our elites, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic?
I'm optimistic.
Okay.
Because I think that this friction, it is a very deep friction, will clarify at the end the basic identity of the basic question. Not only who we are, but also what actually we are coming to find in this Holy Land. And actually we are not just finding a good life in Tel Aviv, a subway of Berlin of Manhattan. We are taking Tel Aviv as a very, very important city that its main function is to be the gate to Jerusalem and Hebron.
Hallelujah. I do hope you're right. And in the meantime, we'll just have to go through this storm. I remember I saw there was, I wrote this out. Now I'm suddenly drawing a blank, but there was a big fire in the Golan Heights and these Golani soldiers got caught in it. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I think it was in the 1980s. And they were told by their headquarters, and they saw this fireball coming at them to run away.
Yeah, it was in Lebanon.
It was in Lebanon.
It was an ambush in Lebanon.
And the people who ran away got overtaken by the fire, and the people who ran through the fire,
that's caused the fire.
They were saved. So I tell this story on Twitter several months ago. I said we have to run through this fire. There's no other way to get past it. We have to go through it. And all of these leftists attacked me, and they accused me of besmirching the memory of the soldiers in Golani who were killed. And it was so out of, I couldn't understand what they were talking about. And it really was sort of...
No, I'll explain it to you in a very, very...
but that was
a very good example regarding Sadat ideas and the way we conceived his dilemma. Joe Island, today retired Major General,
and a member of...
Yes, he was at that time the operation commander of Itzik Mordechai, Battalion 890. And he explained a very, very clear explanation that the chief of intelligence had three premises. All of them happened to be true. The first, that the Syrians will not go to a war without the Egyptians. It means that if the Egyptians are not opening a war, the Syrians
won't go.
He will not open. The second is that the main goal, purpose of Sadat is to get in a war all Sinai, The third is that right now he has no potential to achieve that. All these three premises logically give the outcome that a war is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And I told your island, listen, you know why you didn't understood Sadat? Because life is above logical phenomena. Life is not a logic. It's just beyond logic. This is the main idea of Messianism, and Sadat was Messianistic. It means that if you actually in attention that you want to get all Sinai, and yet you are aware that it is beyond your possibility, if you are just a logical machine, you will say, not now. But if you are a believer of God, your basic idea is that you will begin with what is called in Kabbalah to evoke the activity, itaruta deletata, down on earth, and then God will come to help you by his own trend that he can do by heaven, but you must just open it. This is Kabbalah. And why all these people, including Aaron Reshef, not understanding why and how we can succeed to overcome all difficulties, the Eugene, Samaria, and all that, because they are thinking too much logically. And what's the difference between them and Ben Gurion? Ben Gurion was, first of all, studying Kabbalah, and secondly, aware about the fact that strategical affairs are just beyond logical calculation.
I think you're absolutely right. I always say, it's like, what is it? I always say to my kids, well, if something seems hard to you, I said, just take the first step, because then you're already on your way. And the idea is that if you get into motion, then you're moving forward. And if you don't move forward, then the blasts of the world will keep pushing you.
The same about Rami Levy, if he would come to
the supermarket.
He is today very rich. If he would just want to be accepted to Harvard Business Management School, they will ask him to get a program.
A business plan.
Yes. He never had. He just went from step to another step. And to realize the opportunities. And the opportunities emerged after he began to do something.
So I think we have to stop, but it's true. We went from crossing the Suez Canal to opening up a grocery store chain, but it's all true. It's all a question is, do you believe that you can? And by the way, Amnon Reshef believed we could back then on October 14th, 1973.
Yes, and he had a commander that believed that he could.
And
Arik Sharon was an initiator. Absolutely, with deep bravery, he did that. And actually, by just bringing the troops to cross the canal, they yet didn't know to recognize what next. They succeeded by the wisdom of Arik Sharon to say, then we will see about the opportunities that are coming to be open to us.
That's exactly how you go.
This is warfare. This is the difference between warfare and a special operation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it seems that all we know how to do these days are little tiny special operations, and that has to change now. All right, well, Gershon Hacohen, I think we definitely took a step, and we'll be keeping moving forward. And I appreciate you being here for this very important anniversary. And I'll have you back again to talk about other things like Tel Aviv and all the rest of them, but another day. In the meantime, thanks very much.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova
to everyone and to all Am Yisrael.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.